We'll call the City Council adjourned meeting for Monday, April 16th, 2007 to order. And before we begin, I'd like to call for a moment of silence for the tragedy that happened today at Virginia Tech University. So if we could just remain silent for just a few moments, please. If we'll please stand, we'll begin with the Pledge of Allegiance. Roll call, Tracy.
Arbogast.
Here.
Garnis.
Here.
Gisselbeck.
Here.
Heller.
Here.
Johnson. Absent. Meisenheimer.
Here.
Solberg.
Here.
Walder.
Here.
Wilson.
Here.
And York.
Here.
Thank you.
Before we begin with our agenda items, I want to welcome Mr. Gall's political science class from the high school, and welcome. So thank you for coming tonight. Agenda item number 1 is a motion to approve the minutes of the City Council meeting held on April the 2nd, 2007. Is there a motion, please? So moved by Alderman Heller. Is there a second? Seconded by Alderman Solberg. Are there any additions or corrections? If not, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Item number 2 is an application for a transfer of ownership of an inactive retail on-off sale malt beverage license from Barbara Junso at 313 Summerwood Drive to Lacey Joe Junso of 609 8th Street Northeast. And we'll begin with the public hearing. Is there anyone here to speak to the issue? If not, then we'll close the public hearing and go to council action. All the papers and that are in order, and if I could have a motion to approve the transfer.
So moved.
So moved by Alderman Solberg. Is there a second? Seconded by Alderman Heller. Any discussion or questions? If not, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Item number 3 is the first reading of ordinance 07-11 establishing a C3 highway commercial zoning designation for the Prouty Second Edition. Rick?
Thank you, Mayor, and good evening, ladies and gentlemen of the council. Again, this is first reading of an ordinance to establish zoning on a piece of property owned by Robert Endries. He is a petitioner in this instance. The location of which, and I can show it to you, but it's been included in your packet, and the information included in your packet is at the intersection of 23rd Street East and Highway 212. The request is for to establish the zoning. It's currently unannexed property. Yes.
Please show it for our
Sure.
our TV audience.
Is this illustration adequate, Mr. Garnos? It's kind of busy, but this is Highway 212 and 23rd Street to be right here. I can bring up another one. Maybe it's a little bit more helpful. This shows that we can talk about that too. If necessary, I wouldn't think we need to this evening. We will be talking about this at a public hearing that will be scheduled in a subsequent city council meeting. This one might be a little bit more helpful for everyone. Highway 212, you can see the cursor moving left to right on the screen. That is Highway 212. This intersection where the cursor is now located is the intersection of Highway 212, 23rd Street East. The property here to the left is our current TSC site. This is the site here, approximately 1.1 acres, that is being requested for annexation, zoning, and plating. This evening we are having the first reading of the ordinance, the title of the ordinance to amend our zoning district's boundary map. And that title is ordinance number 07-11, an ordinance amending zoning district boundaries by establishing the zoning designation of C3 Highway Commercial District for certain real property to be annexed into the city. Any other questions at this time?
Thank you, Rick. I'd like to mention that on April the 26th, I'm going to be calling a special meeting in order to facilitate the Dr. Prouty's ability to gather a building permit yet to the first part of May, as opposed to the middle of June. And so we'll have a very brief meeting on April 26th at noon for the second reading of ordinance 07-11, and then adopt the annexation resolution. So, moving on to item number 4 is the FEMA flood insurance study update. Herb?
Thank you, Mayor and members of the council. I'd like to just provide a quick update on what we now know about the flood insurance study to both the city council and to the listening public. To go back in history a little bit, about a year, a little over a year actually, the city received a preliminary digital flood insurance rate map and flood insurance study updates from FEMA on December 30th of 2005. The city was asked and provided changes and corrections to non-technical information such as corporate limits, road names, bridges, and so on to be included in the study. On April 29th, 2006, FEMA initiated a statutory 90-day appeal period for the new and modified base flood elevations for affected property owners or other interested parties. After the appeal period ended, FEMA considered appeal issues and prepared a final report, which was released to the city March 28th of this year. In that report, FEMA announced that the new flood insurance rate map and study will become effective September 28th, 2007. Prior to the new effective date for both the map and the report, the city will be required to adopt a new floodplain ordinance or modify the existing one to include reference to the new map and the new effective date. Some points to remind the public: the new mapping is done under the North American Vertical Datum of 1988, or as we refer to, NAVD 88, versus the old standard of the National Geographic or Geodetic Vertical Datum of 1929. The flood insurance map established new base flood elevations for the Big Sioux River from 14th Avenue North to where the Big Sioux River meets Willow Creek. The resulting revised flood hazard area for the Big Sioux has been remapped in detail. The preliminary update did not address a mapped flood hazard area for the Roby Creek floodplain. That area remained the same as was mapped in 1989 and is currently being updated as part of a separate FEMA study. The base flood elevation for Lake Compesca changed from 1722.7 to 1724.8 feet mean sea level, NAVD 1988 data, or a change of approximately 2.1 feet. The base flood elevation for Lake Pelican was established at 1717.0 feet mean sea level. There wasn't a base flood elevation established previously. FEMA has not yet mapped the lake areas in detail. Again, that's ongoing as part of a separate study this council approved funding for here late last fall. And the lakes will be updated along with Roby Creek and Willow Creek as part of a separate study effort. The one point I would like to emphasize is that between now and September 28th will be the time for property owners who previously provided elevation certificates to the city to submit individual requests for letter of map change once we, the city, are able to provide them with the appropriate flood map panels. We've requested those from FEMA, expect to have them here shortly. We were told 2 to 6 weeks, a couple weeks ago, so I'd expect that we'd see those very soon. You'll need a copy of that flood panel for your specific submittal. With that, I'd be happy to entertain any questions the council might have at this point.
Herb, we're going to have that on GovTV, is that correct?
That's correct.
Mayor, I guess I have one question. The new elevation, does that coincide with like a 100-year flood or a 500-year flood, that type? Do you have any idea, Herb?
I don't know that this has got feedback, but I don't know that I can establish a number. We've heard anywhere in terms of the Corps of Engineers study, which a lot of this data was was geared off of to be somewhere between a 80 and 120 year flood. Pick a number, it depends on who you talk to.
And of course, the council is going to have to adopt some new elevations. Is that correct, Herb?
The minimum the city council has to do, and we'll certainly be working on this effort between now and September 28th, would be to, at a minimum, adopt a revision to our current ordinance, which makes reference to the new flood rate map, as well as the new effective date that I told you previously. It's been suggested by several that we probably want to do a little more with our Big Sioux River flood ordinance, much maybe similar to what we have with Willow Creek. That will take some work and certainly, some discussions with the council in terms of where you want to go, for the city. But as a minimum, we've got to make reference to the new rate map.
Thank you. Are there any other questions then for?
I have
Go
one
ahead.
more question, Herb. Now, if we do not adopt this new FEMA proposal, there are some penalties involved or insurance problems. Can you explain that a little bit?
I'll ask Mr. Schlechter to join me up at the mic in case I misquote anything, but as I understand it, if the city does not adopt the revised map, we put ourselves in jeopardy for being able to compete for any future FEMA funding that might become available during any sort of a hazard.
That's correct. We would no longer be a community in good standing as we have been since 1989 if we fail to adopt these new maps. What that means is the flood hazard doesn't go away, but unfortunately the flood hazard will be there, and people in our community will no longer be able to purchase national flood insurance for the properties that they wish to own. Under any sort of mortgage, a requirement right now is that, in fact, they be covered by the National Flood Insurance Program insurance policy, and failing to be a member in good standing, that will not be available to anyone in our community, quite honestly, nor will we be eligible to receive, as Herb indicated, grant assistance in those times like 1997 when there's a presidentially declared disaster. So it's pretty significant consequences for choosing not to do that.
Okay, if there are no more questions, we'll move on then. Thank you, Rick, and thank you, Herb. Moving on to item number 5, the lease agreement with Glacial Lakes Humane Society in Stanton.
Thank you, Mayor. I don't have a lot to add. I know that the lease is included as part of your agenda. As those of you on the Finance Committee that were at the meeting when we discussed this know, back during the Carter administration, the city entered into a lease with the Humane Society back in 1978. The initial term was 25 years. Once the initial term expired, the lease continued year to year. We were recently approached by the Humane Society, and they requested that we get a little longer term assurance that they're going to be there. My understanding from the now board president is the Humane Society plans to make some improvements at the location. They wanted some security that they're going to be there on a longer than year to year basis. So the Finance Committee recommended that we prepare the lease that's included in your agenda, and the board president is here in the audience, Mr. Hauk, if you have any specific questions for him, but certainly my recommendation that you authorize the mayor and finance officer to enter into the lease with the Humane Society.
Is there a motion then for the approval of the lease agreement? So moved by Alderman Gizelbeck. Is there a second? Seconded by Alderwoman Walder. Any questions or discussion?
That was a 5-year lease.
10-year.
The initial term is 10 years. Thereafter, it's eligible for renewal for subsequent 5-year terms for 3 additional 5-year terms. So total of 25.
Is the 10-year proposed lease satisfactory with the Humane Society?
It is, based on the discussion that we had with the Finance Committee. The initial term of 10 years and then 3 subsequent 5-year renewals was agreeable during the committee discussion.
Because if they want a longer one, I don't know why we can't give them one.
The other thing I'd like to add, I forgot to mention this, we did discuss this at the last Municipal Utility Board meeting. This property is directly adjacent to some of their facilities. We wanted to make certain that they didn't have any trouble with the length or the term or anything like that. And the other thing I want to point out is that the legal description that you see in the lease, we are going to be modifying that slightly. That includes a little more property than we both the Humane Society and the city intend to enter into the lease for. It's a broader description. It's an entire platted property description that we're going to narrow down. I've discussed that with Mr. Houck, and he's aware of that.
Okay, thank you, Stan. Any other questions or comments? If not, all those in favor say aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Item number 6 is a motion to approve the write-off of uncollectible ambulance accounts receivable. That's in the amount of $9,534.10. Is there a motion, please? So moved by Alderman Meisenheimer. Is there a second? Second. Seconded by Alderman Wilson. Any questions or discussion? If not, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Item number 7 is the authorization to apply for and participate in the South Dakota Department of Health Mosquito Control Grant Program. Mike Berger.
Thank you. Yes, I'd like to request permission for the mayor to sign this application for this 2007 grant program. Once again, this is a joint application between Cottington County and the city of Watertown. The total request is for $27,371.12, which is 50% of the combined chemical budget. The program in 2007 provides for 50-50 grant money on chemical expenditures only for existing programs such as ours. Just to briefly recap, the city and the county received $36,500 in 2004, $33,050 in 2005, and $29,885 in 2006, so for a total of approximately $99,435. In addition to this, I would also like to request permission to purchase the supplies and chemicals off a state bid. State bids are available for the adulticide, the formulating oil, which is mixed with the adulticide, the larvicide briquettes, and the granular larvicide that we use. There's not a state bid for the water-soluble packets of larvicide, which are the larvicide that is applied to the storm sewers. But this will be purchased directly from the vendor, but it will not exceed the bid threshold amount. So I would request permission for the mayor to sign their grant application and also purchase supplies off a state bid. And this comes with Public Works approval from April 10th.
Is there a motion, please? So moved by Alderwoman Walder, seconded by Alderman Garnos. Any further questions or discussion?
Yes, Mike, would you give us the comparison again? You're requesting how much money?
Oh, the money, we're request from the grant for this year. We're requesting $27,371.12, and what that is that's 50% of the amount that the county and the city have budgeted as a combined amount for chemicals, because it only pays for chemicals, 50%.
Okay, but that's less than what we have been applying
Yes.
for?
Yep.
Why?
Reason it's less is that this year, right now, we're not going to probably need to buy any adulticide. This is almost all larvicide. The adulticide that we purchased, in 2005, we used quite a bit of adulticide throughout the season, so we budgeted for that, and that luckily doesn't have a shelf life, so we purchased last year enough, and then it was so dry that we were able to save it, but it has an extended shelf life.
So we have carryover of inventory, is that correct, Mike?
Correct, on the adulticide.
Okay, very good. Any other questions? If not, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you, Mike. Item number 9 is the acknowledgement to notice of an intent to conduct a raffle by the Watertown chapter of Ducks Unlimited. If I may have a motion to acknowledge the raffle? So moved by Alderman Meisenheimer. Is there a second? Seconded by Alderwoman Arbogast. Any questions or discussion? If not, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Item number 9 is consideration of applications for the abatement or refund of taxes related to the assessment freeze for low-income elderly or disabled property owners. And Tracy, would you want to explain that for us?
Sure, these are not unlike other tax abatement applications or applications for abatement or refund of taxes. Although they are all related to the elderly or disabled low-income assessment freeze. The explanation that you see on the applications is that the application had been filed after the original deadline, and just by way of explanation, the rule has changed on that in terms of when the low-income elderly or disabled property owners can apply for that. There used to be a rather narrow window of time within which they could apply. These applications are now, under the new rule, can be filed any time during the year, as I understand it, and so we've seen a number of these this month, and I expect that over the course of the year we'll see them continue to trickle in from time to time. the county recommends their approval of all these.
Thank you, Tracy. If I may have a motion then for the consideration of these applications
moved.
for abatement. A motion by Alderman Garnos. Is there a second? Seconded by Alderman Heller. Any further questions or discussion? If not, all those in favor say aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Item number 10 is the open, and we have one item on the open. It's the uptown renovation. I believe Dave Peterson will speak to us on that.
Good evening. You should have a letter in front of you concerning additional costs or estimate of additional costs for some additional work on the uptown renovation project. These are all on 2nd Street East in the block from First Avenue South to Kemp Avenue. The first part of it is replacement of sidewalk in one area where they're cutting through to put the wire and the new concrete along the curb, but the sidewalk is so bad right next to it that it's not figured that they can match into it without having to replace some additional concrete. That's in the amount of $278. The second item is sidewalk in an area that used to be a drive into a garage door that no longer exists. We're replacing the curb in that location, so we would like to put a full heights curb there rather than having a driveway that goes into no place. In order to do that, they have to take an additional concrete out for the sidewalk to replace that so that it won't hold water behind the curb. And the third item is additional curb and gutter in one location on the east side in front of the Prairie Wave building. 52 linear feet of curb and gutter. After looking at it, it is in pretty bad condition, and we didn't have it on the plans as one that we were going to replace, but since they're removing the sidewalk next to it, after looking at it, we would like to see that also replaced. So that's 52 linear feet of curb and gutter. The total add for these three items would be $1,942, and this would be proposed to come out of the curb and gutter and sidewalk funds that we allocate each year.
And the reason why we're dealing with this now in the open, Dave, is so that it just keeps the project going forward. Is that correct?
Yes, if we didn't do it tonight, it would be another 3 weeks before they would have an answer to this, and they're starting on the removal shortly, so
Okay.
we didn't want to hold up the project.
Thank you, Dave. Is there a motion for the approval of these items? So moved by Alderman Solberg. Is there a second? Seconded by Alderman Giselbeck. Any further questions or discussion? If not, all those in favor say aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you, Dave. Moving on to item number 11 is old business. Item number 12 is new business. Any new business to come before the council? Item number 13 is liaison member reports. Nancy, we have a meeting tomorrow morning.
Yes, Safety Committee meeting tomorrow morning, 7 a.m.
Okay, and Tracy, we have a finance meeting tomorrow, 1:30. We will need to go into executive session just briefly in regards to some contract negotiations. We will not be taking any action when we do come out of executive session. If I could have a motion to go into executive session. So moved by Alderwoman Arbogast. Is there a second? Seconded by Alderwoman Walder. All in favor say aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you.